Joining me now is Labour's power broker par excellence, Graham Richardson, and the controversial and gutsy filmmaker Lauren Southern, whose new must-see and highly relevant documentary Crossfire is on YouTube. Graham, great to see you, mate. Lauren, great to see you both. Now, Graham, an extremely cocky Anthony Albanese is wandering around lecturing Scott Morrison about his closeness to Donald Trump. So, if Albo had been PM these past 4 years, he would have snubbed our most important ally and trading partner. Is that how statesmanship works in modern Labor, Graham?
Well, I hope not, and I don't think Anthony's suggesting that. I think had I been leader, I'd have been very nice to Donald Trump, because you have to be. Doesn't mean I wouldn't now be saying, thank God we're rid of the bugger, because I think there's an enormous sigh of relief around not just Australia but around the world, saying thank God he's gone.
Not in this studio there ain't, Graham, apart from you. Lauren, your documentary Crossfire looked at all the Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots over the past 12 months. Even those who once supported Trump, as Graham was suggesting, many of them are now saying he should be convicted or impeached for supposedly inciting that recent Capitol Hill violence. How does that riot, in your opinion, compare to the mayhem you documented in Crossfire?
Well, you know what's interesting? Crossfire is just covering the past 12 months of rioting with Black Lives Matter, which is obviously quite shocking for the public. But I swear the only reason they saw it is because the media just were forced to acknowledge this rioting and violence was going on because it happened day after day for an entire year. The truth is, riots and protests in violent manners have been happening for ages in America under the guise of these antifa protests. I was actually at the inauguration for Trump and remember being there watching a mass of what looked like orcs running down the street, smashing windows, smashing cars, setting limousines on fire when Trump was inaugurated. And we never hear about that. We never talk about it. It was completely covered up, and people are pretending that it was not the left that set this precedent of violence. Meanwhile, you have Donald Trump tweeting out, "Go home, stay safe, don't cause violence," and he is being accused of causing an insurrection. It's absolute madness after what I've watched in my documentary, after what I saw with my own eyes at the Trump inauguration, the violence from the radical left there, to see the hypocrisy from the media and the absolute overblowing of things that happened at the Capitol. Not to say wrong things didn't happen there. Of course, political violence is always wrong, but I saw a media story zooming in on pictures of plastic cups on the ground, calling it the wreckage. The wreckage! Meanwhile, mostly peaceful while there's a whole city ablaze behind CNN anchors. We're not that stupid. People aren't this stupid. We're starting to figure it out.
Richo, in her film, Lauren makes the point that the left in America have escalated the threat of violence by having any Trump supporters labelled as Nazis or racists or white supremacists or whatever. So anybody who happens to have supported Trump, and that was before the current madness. We now have a Democrat congressman, Steve Cohen, suggesting any white male Trump voter is a potential assassin, or that's the implication. 75 million working-class Americans voted for Trump. Richo, you might be glad to see the back of him. They're not. How dangerous is it to allow this sort of escalation to occur?
Well, I don't think anyone likes to see an escalation of this kind. I certainly don't. I'm glad Trump's gone, but I think the celebrations are done, and you should now sit down and work out what happens over the next 4 years, and we'll give Biden a bit of rope and see how he goes. But I don't believe this idea that somehow we should now condemn Trump on every front. The economy didn't do too badly under him for a while. He got some things right. And I think it's always important to acknowledge what your opponents do well, not just criticise them.
Beautiful answer, Graham. Lauren, I mentioned earlier that at the forthcoming Global Climate Conference in Glasgow, they will be demanding that all children in all schools, in all countries, in the Paris Agreement be educated in extreme climate change theory, as well as taught how to protest against governments. You'll be making films about them in 5 years' time, Lauren, won't you?
I guess I'll have to. I'm sure you remember the climate sit-out where young students all decided they weren't going to go to class until the government did something about climate change. I remember a family friend of ours, their daughter insisted on doing this climate sit-out. Of course, any young student is going to take an excuse to not go to class. Do they really know the purpose of it? Do they understand what getting rid of all fossil fuels in your nation means? Do they know who's producing the most carbon emissions? No, they don't understand any of this. They want an excuse to get out of class. So her parents told her, all right, you can do it, but you have to start walking to school then. It's not that far. I'm sure you can do it, but then it won't just be signaling. It'll be actually taking real action. Of course, her passion for green activism died just like that. And this is the thing. Young kids, they are sponges for propaganda. We should not be using them as tools for our political ideology. When did schools decide to stop teaching kids how to learn and how to think and instead decide we need to start telling them what to think? You do that, and the thing is, a government changes, they change to one you don't like, and that'll be what the kids will be taught, what to think, not how to think. And this leads to very scary results.
Graham, Albo wants net zero emissions. We can argue about that till the cows come home, but he's clearly a fan of the Paris Agreement. If Albo were Prime Minister and when this conference comes up, would Labor be signing up to this sort of globalist fantasy?
Sadly, I think yes. It appears to me that they will do that. I think I got off that tram quite some time ago, and I ain't getting back on either. So I think Labor's heading in a direction that is not, if you don't mind the pun, sustainable.
Graham Richardson, Lauren Southern. Graham, you said it first. I think their position is not sustainable. I think Albo... Graham, is Albo going to last till the election?
Oh, yes. Albo will last, and he should.
On that note, Lauren, is Albo, in your observation of Australian politics, is Albo going to make it to the election?
Oh, you know what? Obviously, I've been keeping up a bit, and I think Albo is very out of touch with what's going on right now. For him to call Trumpists, anyone who supports Craig Kelly, all these people, fringe far-rightists, this is half the population in Australia, half the population in the States. If you want to pretend they're fringe, you're giving up a lot of voters that you could have.
I'll take that as a no. Thanks. I'll take that as a no, Lauren. Thanks, Richo. Thanks, Lauren. That's fantastic. We'll see you next week.